Hi, my name's Delphine. At a family meeting meant to honor legacy, my brother-in-law stood up and presented my project, word for word, like it was his, and I let him. I sat there and watched as he clicked through slides that didn't exist, knowing what would happen next. But what hurt more than the theft was the silence. The kind that doesn't come with yelling or accusations, but the kind that grows over years of being passed over, cropped out of photos, left off lists. Ever felt your own family turn you into a footnote? Because that's where my story begins. It was warm in that specific Arizona way, where the air feels dry enough to crack your lips, but the light is too soft to hate. My heels tapped against the sandstone path that led up to my parents' estate in Scottsdale, echoing like a warning. This was the first time we'd all gathered since Grandpa William's funeral the week prior. Technically, it was just an informal family dinner, but we all knew better. The real event was tomorrow, the business strategy session. Tonight was for positioning. The house hadn't changed. Same Spanish tile roof, same wraparound porch, with sagging wicker chairs that no one sat in unless it was for a photo. Inside, the usual mix of citrus cleaner and overcooked lamb filled the air. I stepped through the archway into the kitchen and was greeted with half smiles and distracted nods. It didn't take long before Vera, my sister, slid across the room toward me, her voice sweet as the wine already in her glass. "Oh good, you're here," she said. "Mom forwarded the agenda. You got it, right?" I nodded, even though I hadn't opened the email yet. I waited until I was alone in the guest room upstairs, suitcase still zipped, laptop open on the corner of the bed. The subject line was, "Updated Family Planning Agenda." My mother had written, "Please note, Bryn will present the logistics outline on behalf of the team." Bryn. Not me. Bryn wasn't even family. She was Graham's assistant. I read it 3 times, hoping it was some kind of strange formatting issue. It wasn't. I wasn't in the list of presenters, or anywhere. At dinner, the table stretched like a runway, long and unforgiving. Vera and Graham sat comfortably near the middle, surrounded by our parents and a few board-adjacent relatives. My seat? Far end. The last chair before the swinging door to the restroom, where every 10 minutes someone would brush past me with a muttered, "Excuse me." I smiled anyway, like I hadn't noticed. Graham was in rare form, cracking jokes with Dad, complimenting the catering like he'd hand-selected every item himself. Vera dabbed at his collar once, whispered something that made him smirk. It all felt rehearsed. "Strong male leadership is what keeps tradition alive," Uncle Cal said, raising his glass at one point. Several heads nodded. I cleared my throat. "I've been working on an updated supplier chain," I started. "Oh, did you hear Graham shot 2 under par last weekend?" Mom interjected. "We should make sure he connects with the vendors at tomorrow's breakout." And just like that, I was muted. The only time anyone addressed me directly was when someone at the other end needed the salt. I passed it down without a word. That night, after clearing my plate and enduring just enough small talk to remain polite, I retreated upstairs. The guest room still had the same bedding I used as a teenager, slightly too floral, slightly too tight. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop again. I thought of the 4 months I'd spent building the new logistics model. Nights hunched over the glow of a spreadsheet, testing AI forecasting modules while my takeout went cold. My hands had trembled when I submitted the final version last week, because I cared, because I wanted it to be right. Now, I was invisible. I shut the laptop without saving anything new. Back downstairs, the laughter continued, light and practiced. Graham was still holding court when I passed the dining room on the way to grab some water. I paused. He had his arm slung casually over the back of Vera's chair, his voice low but clear. "Logistics isn't complicated if you know where to look for the gaps," he said. "It's about making the right impression." Then it happened. He glanced toward the hallway, toward me, for just a beat, then turned back to Vera and nodded. And something in me shifted. I couldn't name it yet, but something was happening behind my back. And this dinner? It wasn't a coincidence. I didn't sleep. Not really. The guest room's ceiling fan spun in slow, steady rotations, casting faint shadows across the same floral wallpaper that had been there since I was 16. Every now and then, the wind outside brushed against the stucco walls like a whisper I couldn't quite make out. And beneath it all, Vera's email kept echoing in my head. Not just the words, "Bryn will present the logistics outline," but the casualness of it, the assumption that I wouldn't question my own erasure. I lay still, eyes wide open in the dark, tracing cracks in the ceiling I used to count as a girl. A small voice inside me, steady and unsettling, finally spoke. "Check the prints." I slid out of bed and padded down the hallway barefoot, careful not to wake anyone. The floorboards still creaked outside the linen closet. Nothing had changed in this house, not the patterns, not the hierarchy. Vera had turned the old home office into her personal planning space years ago. It was a neat room, leather organizer trays, framed certificates that didn't quite match her credentials, and that new glossy printer that I hated even when it worked. I opened the bottom tray first. All 15 copies of my proposal were stacked there, untouched. I flipped the first one open. Blank. Completely blank, except for the header, which still bore my name, Logistics Optimization Draft, Delphine Leroux. My stomach dropped like a stone. These weren't printing errors. These had been replaced, on purpose. I took a breath, turned on the printer screen, and opened the activity log. I'd saved the file 2 days ago on a different machine. The log showed it had been accessed again, yesterday morning, from Vera's laptop. I didn't feel rage, not then. I felt cold clarity, the kind that comes just before something breaks. I backed out of the room, careful not to leave anything out of place. Back in bed, I stared at the ceiling again, but now I wasn't still. I was wide awake in a different way. I texted my cousin Leah, the one who used to be on my side. "Hey, did you help Vera print anything for the meeting?" I knew the answer before she typed it, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Yeah, just helped organize a few files. Nothing major. Don't worry." That phrase, "don't worry," like a pat on the head from someone holding a knife behind their back. I put the phone face down. My hands didn't shake, but they were warm. I knew what was happening now. It was coordinated. Quiet, calculated, and just plausible enough for everyone to pretend they didn't see it. I opened my laptop again, more awake than I'd been in days. I wasn't going to beg to be put back on the agenda. I wasn't going to explain myself to a room full of people who only listened to me when someone else ran out of things to say. As I was organizing the files, a notification popped up, LinkedIn. A message from a name I hadn't seen since Seattle. "Delphine, hey, is Graham your brother-in-law? I think he used to work near us." I stared for a moment, heart already tightening. He pitched a logistics project at our firm last year. Sounded brilliant, but, well, it turned out most of it wasn't his. Whole thing blew up. He left before they could formally reprimand him. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The pattern was now a full circle. This wasn't Graham's first theft. It was just the first time he thought the original creator wouldn't fight back. I created a new folder on my desktop, labeled it Real Final, locked it with encryption, set backup protocols, uploaded it to a cloud under a pseudonym account I created back in college, one no one knew about. Then I built a duplicate version, superficially similar, but hollow inside. The slides looked impressive. Charts, color-coded models, placeholder numbers. But none of the underlying code worked. None of the links led to live data. I placed that version into the shared folder Vera had accidentally added me to. I made sure the name of the file was polite, formal, appealing. Family Business Strategy, Logistics V2 Final. And then I stared at myself in the window. The reflection looked tired, but not defeated. "Let him present it," I whispered. My mouth curved, not into a smile, but something more precise. The kind of expression you wear not when you win, but when you're done waiting to be seen. The next morning, I came downstairs early. The house was still quiet, except for the occasional sound of someone moving chairs in the dining room or the hum of the espresso machine warming up. I didn't bother making small talk. I just poured myself a mug of coffee and leaned against the kitchen island, where I had a full view of the living room. Graham was there, rehearsing. He stood in front of the television with his laptop open, clicking through slides he hadn't created. His voice was polished, steady, rehearsed. The implementation phase will begin Q2, aligning cross-functional teams through proactive integration of automated sorting. He paused, nodded, scrolled. This next graph demonstrates our predictive capacity under load variability. Notice the dip at week 6. Intentional stress test. I watched him smooth his tie, practicing his gestures like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. Everyone else just walked by, unconcerned. No one questioned why he had the floor. No one noticed the absurdity of it all. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the heat settle behind my teeth, and kept watching. Not with panic or rage, but calculation. Every movement, every word, every fake glance at fake data. I was documenting it all with my eyes, down to the way he tilted his chin just slightly, as if the spotlight had never once left him. And I remembered. It was last spring, the night before that community business gala hosted by our local Chamber of Commerce. I had been asked to speak. My name had been printed in the program, my bio posted online. I had practiced my remarks 3 times in front of the mirror. I had earned that spot. That evening, just as I was heading out the door, Mom stopped me. She was wearing pearls and that forced calm she put on before saying something damaging. "Let Graham do it," she said softly. "You don't want to seem too aggressive. People don't like that in women." I stood frozen in the hallway, her hand gently pressing my elbow, like it was just a suggestion, not a direction. "Graham's better at delivering," she added. "You've done the work. Let him present it." And just like that, I'd smiled and stepped back. Graham went instead, gave my speech, got a standing ovation. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. The message still got across. But it did matter. It mattered more than I wanted to admit, because that was the first moment I started becoming invisible in plain sight. Later that same morning, as we set the dining table for lunch, I found myself helping Graham and Vera's daughter, Ellie, with the placements. She was all of 7, sweet, sharp, and too young to filter anything. As we laid out the silverware, she looked up and said, "Mom says you're a dreamer, but not someone who finishes things." The plate I was holding slipped slightly in my hand. I caught it before it hit the table, but my fingers tensed around the edge. "Is that what she said?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Ellie shrugged. "She said you always have a lot of ideas, but Uncle Graham knows how to turn them into real stuff." I smiled. I nodded. I kept placing the forks. Internally, something hardened. Not out of malice toward Ellie, who was just echoing what she heard, but because it confirmed everything I'd already started to suspect. They hadn't just stolen my work. They'd rewritten my role entirely. To them, I was an early sketch, a rough outline, something to be replaced with something sleeker, flashier. Back in my room that evening, I sat on the edge of the bed again. I opened the list of every model, system, strategy doc I had built in the past 2 years. 63 files, hundreds of hours. None of them had my name on the slides they were rehearsing. That's how they erased me, not by arguing with what I'd done, but by making sure no one saw it in the first place. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done being surprised. I opened my tablet and checked the shared folder Graham had accessed the night before. The fake proposal, hollow slides, no formulas, empty visuals, was still the only file in there. The one with the single line in bold font. Good luck. Then I glanced at the real folder, encrypted, time-stamped, duplicated across 3 clouds and 1 external drive. This wasn't about regaining approval. This was about pulling off the mask and making sure the people who'd smiled while cutting me out were seen for what they were. As I closed my tablet, Ellie's voice rang again in my head. Not someone who finishes things. No malice, no sarcasm, just confirmation from the only person in that house who hadn't learned to lie politely. I whispered to myself, they all believe I'm just decoration, and that's exactly why the plan had to go through. The hallway leading to the kitchen was lined with family photos, vacations, celebrations, milestones that had been arranged in what Vera liked to call a visual timeline of legacy. Most frames were perfectly leveled, the kind of symmetry that screamed curated. Except for one. It hung slightly askew, always had. I used to fix it when I lived here. Every time I passed, I'd tilt it back into place, but by the next morning, it would be crooked again. Eventually, I stopped trying. It was taken 5 years ago at a company anniversary event. The entire family was in it. Mom, Dad, Vera, Graham, and me. But the way it was framed, my face was half cut. A cropped edge of a smile, a shoulder visible. But my eyes? Gone. No one ever mentioned it. No one offered to reframe it or replace it. It wasn't about the frame. It was about who mattered enough to be centered. I stared at that photo for a long moment before continuing down the hall. The kitchen was quiet. Everyone still upstairs or scattered, prepping for the meeting. I made a cup of tea and wandered to the storage cabinet by the laundry room. It was where they kept old office supplies, some dusty trophies, and forgotten seasonal decor. Buried behind a stack of outdated promotional pamphlets, I found the sketchbook. I recognized it instantly, the worn corners, the paint-stained binding. My name still faintly visible on the cover in faded silver Sharpie. I flipped through until I found it. The logo. It had been a late-night project when I was 17. The original idea for our logistics branch, interlocking gears shaped into the silhouette of a family tree. Grandpa loved it, said, "This feels like us, not just what we do, but who we are." It made it onto staff t-shirts for about 6 months before Vera and Graham decided to rebrand. Said it was too sentimental. Said clean lines and minimalism would position us better in the market. The new logo? A set of overlapping arrows in grayscale. Cold, empty, no soul. I closed the sketchbook and walked into the garage. That's where they'd prepped the banner for tomorrow's presentation. It was leaning against a stack of chairs, freshly printed and glossy. And there it was, the new logo. Except it wasn't new, it was mine. They'd taken the original silhouette, removed the softer edges, added a tagline, repackaged, sanitized, no credit, no mention. Just one more thing quietly absorbed into the Graham-Vera narrative. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or rip the banner. I just looked at it. Then, slowly, I slid the sketchbook into my tote bag and headed back upstairs. On my way, I passed the crooked photo again. This time, I didn't reach out to fix it. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd framed around me. It hit me with a strange kind of clarity. They didn't see me as the weak link. They saw me as inconvenient. Inconvenient to the narrative they wanted. The one where Graham was the visionary, Vera the organizer, and I? The helpful little sister who liked to draw. Back in my room, I pulled out my laptop and opened the project archive. I began building the real strategy file, pulling from the live data, tightening every slide. Not for them, for me. I renamed the folder, uploaded it to a private server, added a timestamp. Then I drafted an email to Jenna, my old college roommate, now a business attorney in Phoenix. The email was simple. If this gets messy, please hold this version as my original. Full metadata included. I scheduled it to send in 24 hours, just in case. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting orange slashes through the blinds, I whispered under my breath, "You framed me out of the picture. Let's see how you look without me in the frame at all. Tomorrow would be the strategy session, and I wouldn't be fixing frames anymore." The call came just after breakfast. I was rinsing out my coffee mug when the name lit up on my phone. Harold Granger, a longtime vendor, someone who'd worked with Grandpa since the early days of the logistics branch. He was the type who sent Christmas cards with handwritten notes and remembered your birthday, even if you only ever met him at quarterly reviews. "Delphine," he greeted, his voice always a warm rumble. "Hey, just checking in before the big event. I noticed something strange on the program. Your name's not on the speaker list." "That can't be right, can it?" The air around me thinned. I pressed the mug into the sink a little too hard. I'm sure it was just an oversight," I said too quickly. "Probably a draft version. You know how these things go." There was a pause on the other end. "Sure," he said gently. "Just didn't want you to be blindsided. You've done the legwork on this." I thanked him, hung up, and stood frozen in place for a moment, the sound of the faucet running into silence. It didn't take long to confirm what I already knew. On the kitchen counter was a stack of printed agendas for the day. I flipped to the second page, where the speaker list was outlined. Key presenters: Graham Whitaker, Vera LaRue. My name wasn't there, not under contributors, not under research leads, nowhere. The entire project had been stripped of my presence in a way so deliberate, so sanitized, it felt surgical. I wasn't just excluded. I had been erased. My pulse hammered in my ears. Not in rage, not in panic. Just that cold, steady drumbeat that comes when truth arrives, without room for denial. A few hours later, we gathered for the pre-meeting luncheon in the garden. White tents, catered buffet, polite jazz drifting from speakers mounted on poles. It was meant to be casual, celebratory, a warm-up before the serious stuff began. Toward the end, Vera stood to give out certificates of appreciation for extraordinary contributions. She held a clipboard and smiled like someone hosting a charity auction. Names were read. Applause followed. Even Michael, a second cousin, who had merely helped compile feedback forms, was called forward and clapped on the back. I stayed seated. I smiled. I clapped, like a ghost watching their own memorial. When it was over and people had begun dispersing to grab dessert or stretch their legs, I made my way over to Vera, calmly, quietly. "Hey," I said, "I think my name might have been missed in the recognitions." She blinked too quickly. "Oh, was it? That's strange. We had so many names to go through. I'll double check. I'm sure it was just a misstep." But she didn't meet my eyes. Her gaze flicked over my shoulder, where Graham stood talking to Dad. She was watching him, for instruction, or for safety. That was all I needed to see. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. "I'm documenting everything now," I said quietly, "just so you're aware." She stiffened, the smile slipping for just a moment. Graham glanced our way and gave a faint smirk, lifting his glass in my direction as if I'd just confirmed what he already believed, that I wouldn't do anything real. He still thought I wanted back in. He didn't realize I'd already moved beyond that. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new document. Not a strategy proposal, not a draft pitch. It was a list. Names, dates, file versions, timestamps, every interaction, every slide, every digital breadcrumb leading from the original research to the version Graham now rehearsed like it had emerged from his own mind. I opened my voice memo app, hit record. "They erased me from the program," I said evenly. "But I'm writing a different one, and they'll remember this list, even if they didn't print it." By the time I walked into the meeting room, the scent of polished wood and oversteeped Earl Grey had already settled into the corners. The table was long, oval, meant to inspire collaboration, but always made me feel like I was being observed from every angle. It was 8:55 a.m. I sat at the far end, no nameplate, no folder in front of me. Graham paced near the projector, laptop in hand. Vera adjusted her blazer while flipping through a printed agenda, her red pen making tiny circles I would never be invited to question. They didn't greet me. No one needed to. At 9 sharp, Dad cleared his throat and nodded toward Graham. "Let's get started." Graham stepped forward, exuding that tailored confidence he wore like cologne. "Thanks, everyone," he began, plugging his laptop into the projector cable. "I'll walk us through the proposed logistics transformation. This is a product of months of integration work." Click. The screen remained blank. Click. Still nothing. He hesitated. "1 second, just a tech hiccup." Vera leaned in, whispered something I couldn't hear. He clicked again. This time, something appeared. But it wasn't what anyone expected. One document, one line. Good luck. There were no slides, no charts, no predictive models or timelines. Just that single line in 72-point font, centered on the screen like a verdict. Silence spread like ink. A few heads turned. One uncle cleared his throat awkwardly. I didn't move. I just sipped my coffee, watching Graham's face pale as he tried to salvage the moment. "Looks like, maybe the file didn't sync properly," he mumbled. His voice faltered. He tapped the mouse again. Nothing changed. Someone from the finance side asked, "Do you have a backup?" "I'll check," he said, but we all knew he wouldn't find one. Graham looked up, and for the briefest moment, his eyes met mine. I didn't blink. I didn't smirk. I just tilted my head slightly and held the gaze, long enough to let him know exactly what this was. No confrontation, no scene, just silence that burned hotter than anything I could have said out loud. I reached slowly into my bag and pulled out a slim black folder, the one I'd carried quietly for weeks, knowing this day would come. "I brought something," I said, voice calm, just above conversational. Graham stiffened. Vera's smile faltered. I opened the folder and laid the contents on the table. First, the original napkin sketch, dated, signed by both me and Grandpa William. The one we drew late one night in the garage when I was 17. The one that inspired the entire operational shift they now claimed as theirs. Next, a printed email chain with attachments, time-stamped files, revisions, my commentary, his acknowledgments. Graham's name appeared only once, on an auto-reply. The room shifted, shoulders straightened, phones were discreetly tucked away. One cousin, who hadn't looked at me in years, nodded, slowly. I didn't need to say more. The paper spoke. The silence filled in the rest. A flash of Grandpa's voice played in my memory, clear as a chime. "A business with no soul is just a building with lights." They had tried to replace the soul with polish, but soul has fingerprints, and mine were all over this. I let go of the last flicker of doubt. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't tremble. Someone asked quietly, "Would you like to present it instead?" I closed the folder and looked around the room, at faces I'd grown up with, faces that had overlooked me, and faces that finally seemed to see. "I already have," I said. And that was the end of that. I stepped into the conference room just before the clock struck 9. The lights had already been dimmed slightly, sunlight slicing through the slats of half-closed blinds. That familiar Arizona warmth fought with the polished chill of the air conditioning, creating a space that felt split, like everything else in this family. The room smelled like citrus cleaner and pressed linen. Someone had tried to make it look important. On the far end, Graham stood by the screen, laptop open, fingers tapping a rhythm that suggested confidence, but smelled faintly of sweat. Vera hovered beside him, adjusting the stack of folders at his elbow, like they were props in a play. Her hair was perfect. Her nerves less so. I slid into my seat at the same far end as always. No greetings, no introductions, just the rustle of paper, the subtle shifting of alliances around the table. Dad nodded toward the screen. "Let's begin." Graham cleared his throat, tapped the remote. The screen stayed black. Click. Again. Still nothing. He gave a tight laugh. "Apologies, folks. You know how these things go. Technology and I are old enemies." Click. This time the screen lit up, but not with a slide deck. A video began to play. There was no title screen, no preamble, just the grainy footage of a kitchen, our kitchen, and a voice that made my stomach tighten before I even registered what he was saying. "She'll freeze like she always does," Graham's voice said. "Delphine doesn't know how to close." The room went still. Chairs stopped shifting. Breath stopped halfway out. On screen, Graham leaned back in one of our dining chairs, wineglass in hand. Vera sat across from him, out of frame, but her laugh was audible. He smiled. "She's brilliant," he said, "but invisible. Let's keep it that way." I heard someone gasp. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God!" No one moved. No one turned to me. Except him. Graham's eyes darted in my direction, wide and unsure for the first time in years. He looked like a man caught at the altar with the wrong vows in his hands. I didn't move. My laptop stayed shut. My hands rested calmly on the table. I had nothing to add. Dad coughed, not a word, just the clearing of his throat, like that could smooth over the punch in the gut that had just been projected for a room full of stakeholders. Mom blinked too fast, one hand clutching her necklace like it might tell her what to do. Vera reached for the laptop cable, fumbled, unplugged it too late. The damage had already been done. My cousin whispered to no one in particular, "Did they really just say that?" Uncle Raymond, who hadn't taken a side in 15 years, crossed his arms and leaned back, his face tight and unreadable. But his body had shifted, away from them, toward me. No one said anything, which was perfect, because silence here had always been a weapon, and now it was a verdict. I looked at Graham one more time. He was pale, his jaw tense, but still holding on to whatever illusion he thought he could preserve. Vera stared straight ahead, face blank, but her fingers twitched at the base of her folder. When I finally spoke, it was barely above a murmur, but everyone heard. If I had made that video, it would have been cruel. I let that sit. 1 second. 2. But I didn't. I reached forward, tapped the table once with my index finger. It auto-played from your own shared folder. Someone exhaled like they'd been holding it for an hour. There was a pause. Then the sound of one hand clapping, slow, deliberate. Then another. No standing ovation, no grand declarations, but the kind of applause that doesn't belong to a room. It belongs to a reckoning. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat in the chair they didn't think I'd fill, and let them watch me become the story they tried to write without me. The room didn't so much empty as dissolve. After the video, after the brief ripple of stunned applause, conversation returned in awkward bursts. Short, murmured exchanges, glances cast downward, chairs scraped just enough to create an exit. I stood near the window, sunlight crawling slow across the carpet like it was trying to slip out of the room too. Someone clapped again, out of rhythm, like they didn't know what else to do. No one joined them. It died quickly. I didn't move. My hands were steady at my sides, my breath calm. Not because I wasn't shaking on the inside, because I refused to let them see it. Across the room, my mother sat stiff in her chair. She hadn't said a word since the video, hadn't even looked in my direction. I waited. Just one glance, one nod, some flicker of recognition. She adjusted her bracelet. She looked at the carpet. She looked anywhere but at me. That silence was louder than anything Graham had said. Louder than the laughter in the video, than the gasps that had followed. It was worse than being insulted. It was being made irrelevant. When Dad approached me a few minutes later, it was with a kind of heavy caution, like he was stepping around broken glass he didn't want to admit he'd helped shatter. "We're already under a lot of stress," he said quietly. "Maybe just, don't turn this into a scandal, Delphine. Let it cool down." I turned to face him fully. "I didn't turn anything," I replied. "They did." His mouth opened like he had a rebuttal. Then it didn't come. He just nodded like I'd made a good point he didn't want to deal with. Later, I stepped out into the hallway toward the guest rooms. Vera was already there, waiting for me like she had rehearsed it. "You didn't have to go that far," she said softly. I didn't blink. "I didn't go far enough." She hesitated. "It's not what you think. Things get messy, Decisions get made under pressure. No, I said. You just never thought I'd stop letting it slide. She tried to soften her voice. We've all made mistakes, Delphine. This whole thing's it's a misunderstanding. I smiled, but it was a small, sharp thing. You misunderstood how long I've been watching. Her face twitched. I walked past her before she could formulate the next spin. Back in the guest room, I didn't slam drawers or tear down posters like a teenager wronged. I simply packed. My things had never taken up much space in that house anyway. I folded each piece deliberately, zipping the suitcase with the same calm I'd used when encrypting the real project files. I didn't take the name tag from the meeting, the one with Delphine Leroux, Logistics Coordinator, printed in bold. I left it face down on the nightstand like a headstone. Before I walked out, I looked around the room once. Not out of sentiment, but finality. The room was beige, floral, untouched, like a set left over after the lead actor quits. I didn't say goodbye. No one came to stop me. Outside, the sun had dropped behind the hills, casting long shadows on the lawn. I walked slowly to my car, let myself settle into the seat. I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and typed a text to Jenna. Start the filing, I'm ready. I wasn't suing anyone, not yet. This was about formally beginning the process of transitioning all rights to the real project structure under my name. Quietly, legally, permanently. They'd think I was just leaving, but I was documenting my own return before they even knew I'd gone. The morning after, the house felt hollow. Not quiet like rest, but quiet like shame. A kind of emptiness you don't fill with eggs and toast, the kind that soaks into the walls. No one knocked on my door, no footsteps in the hallway. Just the faint sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen, like someone was pretending things were still normal. I stayed in bed longer than usual, not because I was tired, because I wanted to see if anyone would come. They didn't. Eventually, I sat up and reached for my phone. One notification, a text from Leah, my cousin. The one who used to share gum wrappers with me under the table during board meetings we weren't invited to. The one who knew better. Sorry I didn't speak up. If I did, I'd lose my place too. That was it. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't reply. I just saved it. Not for revenge, just for the record. The sentence lodged in my chest like a thorn. Lose my place. Like the only way to be safe in this family was to stay small. Stay agreeable. Stay out of the way. I got out of bed, dressed slowly, poured myself a cup of coffee from the half-full pot in the kitchen. No one else was around. Not even Vera. By late morning, my phone buzzed again, this time with a push notification. Graham had posted a video on his professional profile. I clicked it, sat down, watched it unfold. I deeply regret the confusion surrounding recent events, he began, standing in front of a soft-lit bookcase. I take full responsibility for the miscommunications and understand the importance of transparency in all business relationships. His tone was polished. A background instrumental track played softly. Piano, something moody and slow. The lighting flattered his jawline. The apology was full of words and yet said nothing. He never mentioned me, never said my name, just the situation and misunderstandings. I scrolled through the comments. Such grace. Real leadership. This is how men own their mistakes. And then, this sounds AI generated. Anyone else feel like this was written by ChatGPT and an intern? I set the phone down on the table. My stomach didn't twist. My throat didn't close. I'd already seen behind the curtain. Later that afternoon, a friend from my grad school days texted me a screenshot. Vera just reposted the video. Her caption says, "Family first, always." It wasn't damage control. It was narrative design. They weren't sorry. They were curating their side of the story, shiny and smiling, with all the blood cleaned up. I didn't respond to that either. Instead, I opened my photo library. Scrolled back 10 years. found the picture of Grandpa William and me in the garage, both of us covered in smudges of ink, laughing. He was holding up the original sketch I'd drawn, the prototype for what would become the entire logistics brand, the version that got buried under rebranding and streamlined identity later. I posted the photo with one sentence. Some stories don't need edits. No hashtags, no blame, just truth. Within an hour, I had a dozen direct messages from former employees, from vendors, from people who'd been told I'd stepped back voluntarily, who said they always wondered why my name wasn't on anything. That night, as the sky turned that bruised blue outside my window, I sat in the quiet and watched the likes tick up, not in waves, but in slow, meaningful ripples. My phone buzzed again, a number I didn't recognize. A voicemail left by a local journalist asking if I'd be willing to comment on recent events within the La Rue business structure. I didn't return the call. Not yet. I held the phone for a moment and then whispered, not to anyone, but the air around me. I'll let the silence speak for now. The office smelled like lemon wood polish and paper from another decade. Not dusty, just aged. Familiar. The kind of place where names outlast the voices that once spoke them. I stepped inside, greeted by the same receptionist who used to hand Grandpa William his coffee with 2 sugars and a nod that meant she knew he was more than his signature. She smiled as soon as she saw me. He said you'd come. I didn't ask when. I didn't have to. There was a manila envelope waiting on the desk with my name written in his handwriting, slanted, purposeful. Delphine, in blue ink, underlined once. The lawyer, Mr. Trent, didn't say much. He slid the envelope across the table like it weighed more than a legal document should. I took it in both hands, steady now, and opened it carefully. Inside, a flash drive and a sealed folder. The drive clicked into the side of my laptop with a soft snap. I hit play. Del, my grandfather's voice said, clear and low, as if he were in the room with me. If you're hearing this, it means someone tried to erase you, and I'm sorry I wasn't there to stop it. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Not anymore. I just listened. You're the reason this business survived long enough to become something worth inheriting. Your name deserves to be on the door and on the plans and in the history that will be told after we're all gone. He paused, exhaled. I could almost see him leaning back in his office chair, rubbing his temples, tired but proud. People forget names. They rewrite contributions, but they can't rewrite structure. So I did what I had to do, and I hope you'll do what you must. I sat there, eyes locked on the screen as the audio ended. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of purpose. I opened the sealed folder. Inside, a notarized amendment, a legal transfer of creative and operational control for the logistics branch, signed 6 months before he passed. No space for interpretation. My name in bold, clean font. The clauses airtight. It bypassed my father. It bypassed the current management structure entirely. It didn't ask for consensus. It declared lineage. In the margin of the final page, a handwritten note. Families don't have to agree, but they must remember. Later that afternoon, I met with the corporate advisor overseeing the estate transitions. A tall man with an expensive tie and the kind of smile that only bends under clarity. I handed him both folders, one with the notarized transfer, one with a printout of Graham's apology video and its social media analytics. I'd like this on record, I said. He flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. Understood. Do you want to issue a public statement? No. Just let me know which one of these versions will age better. That evening, I rented a small space downtown. It wasn't glamorous, just a brick unit with concrete floors and good bones. I called a few consultants, people I trusted, people who hadn't sold their integrity for convenience. We laid out the rollout plan. It wasn't about a rebrand. It was about restoring the original intent. My first email to the team began simply, "This business was built by hands you never saw." And I meant every word. Before I closed my laptop that night, I copied the audio file of Grandpa's message onto an encrypted hard drive, then backed it up to cloud storage. I didn't need to post it. I didn't need to share it in a boardroom or attach it to a press release. I just needed to make sure it wouldn't disappear. His last sentence stayed with me long after I shut everything down. And if they forget your name, make sure the system you built doesn't. The bench out back hadn't been sat on in years. Weathered wood, a splintered armrest, overgrown ivy sneaking around its legs like it was trying to reclaim it. And yet, it held me as steady as it always had. The house behind me was quieter than it had been in a long time. Not just in sound, but in presence. Conversations that had once echoed through the hallways had turned into short murmurs, half-finished sentences. It wasn't guilt. It was discomfort. That sharp awareness of having been complicit and now unsure how to behave when the story shifted out of their hands. I didn't need noise anymore. I just needed truth to linger. And it had. Vera appeared beside me like she'd been waiting for the courage to approach. 2 mugs in her hand, both steaming. "Coffee," she said. I nodded, took the cup. The ceramic was warm. Her expression wasn't. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to explain. Instead, she sat down next to me and said, "I underestimated you." I didn't flinch. "You assumed I'd rather be liked than remembered." She let that settle. We sat there, drinking slowly. A breeze pushed through the hedges, rustling dead leaves. It should have been tense, but it wasn't. That silence used to hurt. Now it just felt earned. "I didn't know about the letter," she said finally. "You didn't want to," I replied. Convenience doesn't ask questions. She didn't argue. For once, Vera just sat with the truth instead of trying to spin it. By the end of that day, word had trickled through the family. Graham was gone. No calls, no emails. Just gone. Someone mentioned he was job hunting out of state. Another said he had connections in Dallas. I didn't care. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't bitter. I was indifferent, and that surprised me more than anything. I overheard an uncle say, he had potential, but, and then trail off, like they couldn't finish the sentence without indicting themselves in it. When the business advisor called, he didn't sound apologetic, just brisk, like someone cleaning up paperwork that should have been filed months ago. "The board's been briefed," he said. "You'll be leading the logistics rollout officially. We'd like you to present next week." I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I didn't fist pump or celebrate. I simply said, "Okay." Because this time, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about doing it the way it should have been done from the start. That night, I stood in my childhood room and opened the drawers I hadn't touched in a decade. Old sketch pads, folders with ideas half-dreamt, notes scribbled in margins I once thought no one would read. At the bottom of a drawer, beneath a stack of newsletters and handouts, I found a letter I'd written to myself when I was 19. It wasn't sealed. It was just folded neatly, the paper yellowing at the edges. "Dear me, don't let them reduce you. Don't become a mirror for their convenience. Build, stay curious, you will not disappear." I read it aloud in the empty room. "You will not disappear." And I hadn't. I packed the letter into my laptop bag, not because I needed a reminder, but because it deserved to leave this house with me. The next morning, I walked back out to the bench, ran my fingers along the wood. It creaked beneath my touch. Worn, sure, but unbroken. Just like me. Just like the legacy I was about to carry forward. The morning air in Phoenix was dry and steady, like it had nothing left to prove. I arrived before anyone else, just as the sun broke over the skyline, brushing gold against the windows of the new logistics center. There were no cameras waiting, no ribbon stretched across the entrance, just a clean sidewalk and quiet wind. That was exactly how I wanted it. I walked toward the building slowly, taking it in. The facade was sleek, glass and steel blended with reclaimed wood from Grandpa's old warehouse. The design firm had followed my plans exactly. Simple, strong, modern with roots. My eyes found the lettering above the double glass doors. Not a plaque, not a banner. Etched, permanent. The LaRue Initiative, in honor of William and his granddaughter. And below it, in bold serif, Delphine LaRue. No initials, no abbreviations, no one else's name. I stood there for a moment, letting it settle. The sun hit the metal just right. The words glowed. Inside, the mural wrapped around the welcome wall. A stylized map of our supply routes curved across hand-painted lines that mirrored the gears from my first teenage sketch. The team had kept them faint, but intentional. My original marks preserved behind layers of new polish. Guests began arriving around 9. Colleagues, clients, a few board members, vendors I'd worked with for years who hadn't known how much of the system I'd built until it unraveled. They shook my hand. Some gave tight smiles, others nods that held more weight than words. Graham didn't show, not that I expected him to. Vera sent flowers, white lilies in a tall vase. No card, just a generic label that read, "Congratulations on the launch." I had them placed by the front desk. They looked fine there, neutral and unassuming, like her. My mother came, briefly. She stood near the back of the gathering, hands clasped in front of her, like she was attending a wake. She didn't speak. I didn't walk toward her. We let the space between us say whatever neither of us could. When it was time to speak, I didn't pull out a note card. I didn't clear my throat for attention. I simply stepped up to the small podium by the entrance and let the room come to quiet. "This place wasn't built in a year," I said. "It wasn't built by any one person. It came from late nights, overlooked hours, and people who did the work long before they were thanked for it. If they ever were." I paused. The silence felt soft this time. "I hope we see better now. I hope we build that way moving forward." Applause followed. Not loud, not theatrical, but steady, sincere. After the guests mingled, took their tours, and drifted away into their respective Tuesdays, I stayed behind. Walked the halls alone, touched each corner with my eyes, making mental notes of where to hang artwork, what areas needed softer light. In the main conference room, I ran my fingers across the nameplate on the door. Delphine LaRue, Director. It was mine. Not assigned, not borrowed, not decorative. I stood in the center of the room, closed my eyes, and breathed in deeply. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. As I stepped outside to lock the door for the evening, the sun was dipping low. Its last rays lit the sign again. My name shimmered, etched, not printed, not removable. "They stole the pitch," I whispered, then smiled. "But I built the building." In life, the loudest voices aren't always the most truthful, and sometimes the silence, our own quiet persistence, is what shapes legacy. I used to think that speaking up meant shouting louder, fighting harder. But I've learned that real strength can look like walking away from the table you built, only to build a better one in your name. What they tried to take from me wasn't just credit. It was belonging. And what I reclaimed wasn't just a title. It was my place in a story they thought they could rewrite. But here's the truth. No one can erase what you've built with your own hands, especially when your name is carved into the foundation. So, if you're someone who's ever been overlooked, doubted, or made to feel invisible in your own family, your workplace, your community, I see you. And more importantly, I believe you. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been written out of a story you helped build? What did you do? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story struck something in you, or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't like this video, tell me why. I welcome all voices here, even the hard ones. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that cut deep but heal stronger, don't forget to subscribe. Tap that bell so you won't miss the next one. Your story might be next.